efforts and other resources to help them recover from the hurricane. How many of you have been to Puerto Rico? Oh, wow, several of you. Okay, that is cool. Vacation, work, other things? Vacation, yeah, okay. All right.
It's beautiful, right? San Juan was amazing. High rises, luxury condominiums, modern city. Looked like to be in the U.S. I was amazed. About 1 million people in San Juan. It wasn't until we really got outside of San Juan that we began to realize the devastation in the country. You know, this is normal though. Big cities usually bounce back pretty quick. That's where all the infrastructure is, where all the focus is. You'll see today, I think my reflection on it is that San Juan looked like they were rolling pretty good. About the only thing I could see was most of the stoplights were out. But they were driving through, you know, big intersections very carefully. We didn't see any major
Sometimes
accidents.
carefully.
Yeah.
A little scary.
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't like riding in India. I rode in India a year ago, and that was different. So in any case, no, it was quite good. There were still a lot of pockets in San Juan without electricity. I think there were about 15% of the people in San Juan still without electricity. A lot of the buildings we went into still did not have electricity as well. But they were making out. And then when we went out in the countryside, you'll see this where a lot of the devastation is that will take a long time, probably 5 years or better to clean up and restore livable conditions in a lot of communities.
We've got a lot of pictures, so let's start with some pictures of Puerto Rico and just a quick intro to the island and the people there. And if you'd like to move up front, there's a bunch of open seats at the front, as it is usual on Sunday morning. So feel free to move up. No judgment if you want to move up front. So Puerto Rico is an island measuring approximately 100 miles by 35 miles. Dominican Republic is to the west. The British Virgin Islands are to the east, the Atlantic Ocean to the north, and the Caribbean Sea to the south. How many of you know that Puerto Rico is the territory of the United States? Okay, good. All right, so when people say, why are we helping those Puerto Ricans? Well, they're Americans like us. Isn't that great? We can help our brother and sister Americans. Austin got some shots of Puerto Rico from the air, and it's mountainous there, and there's also beaches. In some ways, reminds me of Virginia. There's lots of different sort of landscape and climate depending on where you are. The population of Puerto Rico, anybody know population of Puerto Rico? 3.5 million. Okay, but now note, 3.5 million Puerto Ricans in Puerto Rico. The number of Puerto Ricans living on the mainland in the United States, 5.5 million. Okay, so that in part tells the story of what is going on in their community, is that a lot of people have left and more people are leaving now. And one of the most heartbreaking scenes I saw was on our last day as we're leaving. And all these people were in our way, and I don't know about Gary. Gary's more patient than me. I was getting frustrated. I was like, move, I'm trying to go to security, right? And this huge crowd of people, and I'm pushing through, and we couldn't find the line for security, and I finally find it. We start, weaving through those little rope line they have you go through, and I look back, and it's just a crowd of people watching, and I realized it is Puerto Rican people who are saying goodbye to their family members who may not be coming home again. And there were tears, and there were hugs, and it broke my heart to realize, that a lot of people leave and don't come back. And I get it. I mean, I get why people would want to come to the mainland, right? Opportunities here. But what that means is for people in the island, a lot of the resources are being depleted. Their people resources are leaving.
A couple of facts about Puerto Rico. It was under Spanish control for 400 years until 1898, Spanish-American War. The U.S. took control. So most people speak Spanish. 92% of the population is Catholic, and the balance pretty much Protestant. Some Methodist churches. There are 100 Methodist churches across Puerto Rico.
The poverty rate is 43% before the hurricane hit. After the hurricane hit, they estimate it's about 53%. So it increased by 10 percentage points as a result of the hurricane. The very first day, we landed there on Monday afternoon, and we went to dinner at this restaurant called Raices, and that's the sign out front. Something happened that day that I want to share with you, just as sort of a simple story that happened. We were sitting together at kind of a high top table, and there was a family sitting next to us at a regular table. And the child, the boy, he must have been like 5 or 6 years old. You know, he was leaning back in his chair. You know how kids do? He was leaning back in his chair. And the one time he leaned back, and it went all the way back. And there was this crash, like a huge sound. And everyone in the restaurant turns and looks at them. And then he like got up, and he realized he wasn't hurt, but he was scared about what happened. So he began to cry. And then he walked around to his dad, who was on the other side of the table, and his dad scooped him up, and he held him. And then his mom leaned over, and he kissed him. And what I realized in that moment is they're just like us. The people of Puerto Rico are just like me, and I'm just like them. And here's a family doing their normal thing, going out to eat. And when their child is hurting, they comfort him, and they hold together as a family with one another. So that for some reason that stuck with me. And I don't know anything about the family except to say, wow, that's us.
That's my pork chop. The pork chop was about this big.
Literally. It was huge. It was huge, absolutely. The food was excellent, though. That's the fried cheese there that came in cubes, and they have the super fancy sauce they call mayo ketchup, which is a combination of mayonnaise and ketchup. They were very proud of it, though, for some reason. I don't know. I don't know what that was. Like, Pastor Brad, have you heard of mayo ketchup? I was like, yeah, we have that, except we usually keep it separate. Except, I don't know, is that the special sauce at McDonald's? I don't know. Let's talk a little bit about Hurricane Maria. We've got a lot of pictures of the damage from that. Austin, are we ready to go to that next? Hurricane Maria hit September 20th. We are told that the eye of the hurricane was something like 6 to 7 miles wide. Okay, so if you can imagine the center portion, 6 to 7 miles wide, 175 mile an hour sustained winds that were measured on the ground by people from the first church we visited, and then gusts of 240 miles an hour. So we saw damage to homes and trees. You see, this is an overhead shot. Notice all the blue roofs. Anybody know what the blue roofs are? Tarps, right, tarps. So all the roofs that were damaged, they got tarps covering them. And so remember, now this is 3 months later, 4 months later, where people are still with roofs that have holes in them. A lot of people were without electricity for a long time. Where do they stand with that now, Gary?
So checked yesterday, and they say still 450,000 people without electricity. Probably that's mainly in the rural areas. I suspect San Juan's probably pretty well recovered at this point, but the pictures you'll see communities that are still without electricity.
They're also without clean drinking water. They advised us not to drink the tap water, and they didn't either. They drank bottled water there. So that's still an issue for them. We've got a picture, I think, or an image of like a map of Puerto Rico with a red line running through it. Austin, do you have that for us? Can you see the red line running through the middle? That is the approximate path of the hurricane. So you can see it started in the southeast corner, and it moved west across the island. And came out on the northwest corner, but it basically split that island sort of right in two, and affected. You know, if you look at satellite imagery, it just covered the whole island. It's hard to imagine, you know, a storm that big, but you know that's how big it was, and just split the island right in two.
So you can see San Juan, a little red dot in the northeastern area. We landed in San Juan, and then Vieques Island is the big island on the east there. We got a chance to tour from San Juan down to Vieques, and then came across the island diagonally southwest to the southwest coast, and then up around. So we got to see a good swath of the eastern port of the island of Puerto Rico.
At the very bottom, you'll see Caja de Muertos right here. We'll talk about that later, but we came to this coast, which is right across the water from that little island called Caja de Muertos. Okay, so 35 miles top to bottom and 100 east to west. Maybe now we should talk about Caja de Muertos. Do you have a photo of the island, Austin? Okay, does anybody know what Caja de Muertos means? Yeah, yeah. So they call it Coffin Island or Island of the Dead. Because it looks to them like a coffin, right? I mean, that's how it got the name. So we drove along the coast there and saw that in the distance. But then we saw something else. We saw this pile of rocks and like skulls. I think they were toy skulls or something. And someone named this pile Caja de Muertos 2. And this was their nod toward the death and destruction that had happened, saying, okay, yeah, that's the island of death, but this is the island of death here. And the official government statistics, they told us something like 57 people died in the storm. But the people we spoke to on the ground said, no, it's more like 800 or 900 because lots and lots of people needed electricity to sustain their life-saving medical interventions, and other people who got sick and people who were lost. And so really the number is more like in the many, many hundreds who died from the storm. And that picture, that sight of this, someone making this monument and calling it the Island of Death number 2, that stuck with me and really helps kind of tell the story of how the people are coping with this. And there is a sense of despair among some people. Now it's getting better and they have hope, but it's been difficult.
Yeah, this was right along the coast, south coast, Caribbean coast, and the stick-built homes, what basically are 2x4 built homes, will not sustain 240-mile-per-hour gusts. So those were basically leveled in this area, and there were a lot of people along the coast that their houses were completely gone. They had moved in with neighbors. And of course, their neighbors' houses were leaking, were blue roof houses, so that's the kind of devastation, in the countryside.
Any questions at this point? Let's talk a little bit about what the Methodist Church there is doing. I don't want you to get the impression that we're the only ones doing anything. The Methodist Church there is on the ground, they're active, they're responding, and so here are some of the things that they are doing. They're partnering with FEMA, and with UMCOR, which is the United Methodist Committee on Relief. And so far, as of our trip early this month, they had distributed 12,000 bags of food and water, $17,000 in food vouchers, 30,000 hygiene kits, plus a bunch of little solar lamps. They call them Lucy lights, and they're solar-powered lamps that can be inflated. And so for people without any power, they've got a little light at least. 30,000 hot meals. What else? They've set up camps along that red line. You remember that red line where the hurricane hit? They set up work camps, mission camps, and they're operating out of those camps to do home repairs in those communities that were hardest hit. And they've brought a mission coordinator on board as part of their team with the Methodist Church to coordinate teams who are coming to help.
Since we've come back, because before going, understand this is real early in a recovery effort. In fact, the relief effort is just really winding down, and now the recovery effort where they start rebuilding is underway. Before we went, UMCOR really was just in preliminary stages with the bishop, Hector Ortiz, in planning. Since we've come back, I've been on UMVM, United Methodist Volunteer Mission, and UMCOR websites, and they have early response team procedures now and ways for early response teams to sign up to go and stay in these areas where there are 3 camps and to do work to help families recover. They're going through screening methods to select families that are in need that the Methodist Church would support. So
let us tell you about our trip. We flew down on Monday. Left Lynchburg Airport early in the morning on New Year's Day, which is just ever so much fun. And we flew to Charlotte and made our connection on the way down, and made it into San Juan in the afternoon. So we didn't do a lot on Monday, except we went to dinner where the kid fell out of his chair, and we had some conversation with a woman named Carmen Perez. She is the assistant to the bishop. But she's way more than an assistant. The idea about the person behind the person. Well, Carmen is the real deal. She is so sharp. This is a picture of her with Gary and me. She was our tour guide. She was the person to teach us and coach us through all the things that they were experiencing. She helped us interpret what was happening there, not only with the language, but with ideas. Just really incredibly sharp and a great asset for us to have there in partnership.
So the bishop, you'll see his picture in a minute, Hector Ortiz, has been in the bishop position about a year. And he actually recruited Carmen Perez from Florida. She was living in Florida, and she's on like a 4-year assignment. So you can think about it. You're new in your job. You're down in Puerto Rico about a year, and all of a sudden you've got to deal with this massive hurricane and all the devastation. So that's where they are. And but we were super impressed with both of them. Very dedicated. And very helpful with us, touring us around, and their hospitality was amazing.
Anything else from Monday, Austin?
I think that's all.
Okay. So Tuesday morning, we got up early, and we went to another airport, a teeny little airport, and a teeny little airplane. And Will Carvajal maybe has some insight on these things. Who fly teeny little airplanes. This is like a 10-seater. Anybody ever been on a 10-seater before? Oh, all of you? Oh, man, okay. I thought this was something like cool and special. Everybody's been doing it, apparently. I'm late to the party. It was really cool. The pilot gave his safety briefing, like with his feet on the ground and his head inside the plane, like leaning in, you know. And I was like, have you done this before? And he said, yeah, once or twice, you know. He was mocking me and making fun of my fear. It was great. It was great. The views were spectacular from 1,500 feet over the island. And so we flew from San Juan, and we went east. Remember the map, that teeny little island of Vieques, which is to the east. And so we weren't sure exactly like what the deal was, but as we learned and saw and met the people, we saw that they were some of the hardest hit communities. The teeny island of Vieques has 9,000 inhabitants. And the poverty rate there, you said, is?
68%.
68%. So this is the community where they're in need of medical care, need a lot of help in rebuilding. But the plane ride was pretty cool, and the views from the air were spectacular. The first stop, there are 2 Methodist churches on Vieques, and both of them showed up with their church bus, their church van, and we got in the church van and we rode around the island. They showed us around. And there were horses everywhere, just all over. And apparently they belong to someone. They're not just wild. I think that's what I heard them say, but they seem to be all over. The first community we went to was called Esperanza. And Esperanza means, do you know? Hope. Esperanza means hope. So that was a good sign from God that here's a community named Hope. And they had it, and they needed it. So we met the pastor, Alex, and that's him in the center there, the young, handsome guy with the blue polo, and that's the bishop with the yellow shirt on. And so we went to Esperanza first and went to Alex's church. They had some incredible damage to the roof, just amazing. Where the roof was just peeled off, and this was a metal roof that just was never going to be able to sustain these winds. My sense, I'm not a meteorologist, but my sense is the hurricane hit Vieques harder and first before it lost some power when it got on the Big Island. And so the damage there was just amazing. These photos are taken from the inside of the second floor of the church, which now has like a huge skylight. It's not supposed to be there. One cool thing, this church was operating they have a camp that they operate, and it's part of their income stream, but it's also part of their ministry where they host groups who come and stay. But they had so much damage to their camp facilities, they're not able to run it right now. This is Mamita. We went to visit her. She lived right around the corner from the church, and she is one of the residents who's been affected by the hurricane. You can see the blue tarp on her roof. She had lots of damage to her home, which was pretty modest to start with, She had no electricity at this point, and she was storing her food, even the canned goods, in the refrigerator. And at night, she would check to make sure there were no rodents in the refrigerator before shutting the door to keep the rodents out of her food.
Do you remember Hugo, the Hurricane Hugo? The refrigerator she was using to store canned goods stopped working during Hugo. So the house is leaked ever since Hugo.
She said FEMA offered to replace her furniture. And she said, no, thank you, because the roof is leaking and it's just all going to get ruined. She said, can you help me with my roof? And they said, no, we're not doing that. So, you know, we all have complaints about the federal government, but this is one of those people we saw that is really struggling, who wasn't getting the kind of help she would have hoped for in the midst of this. Everywhere you can see, you know, water damage and lines where the water came up to, and different indicators of the water level, in some places higher than others.
So not only was Puerto Rico significantly damaged by the winds, but the tidal surge was tremendous. Highest tidal surge, I don't remember the statistics, but just huge. So any areas along the coast were flooded. This wall, I think if we, this is in Vieques, and Esperanza is one of the resort areas. They're about the only industry at all on Vieques is vacationers and tourist industry. So there's two small communities, Esperanza and Isabel, that we'll see in a moment.
Are we ready for Isabel Segunda next? Okay. So the second community we saw where the Methodist Church is Isabel Segunda, and this is the Methodist Church there. They had relatively little damage, if any, that I'm remembering to their church. But we loved their sanctuary. It's beautiful. You can see that. And they have an upper room, a fellowship hall upstairs that we thought, well, wow, this would make a great clinic site for us to go and take teams. It's open, airy, it's bright. There's space for multiple setup spots if we were to have partitions and set up our doctors and nurses and dentists and such. This is a church that is in the town square in the community of Isabel Segunda. The story goes that as the communities were being established in Puerto Rico, every town square was set up more or less the same, with the Catholic Church on one corner and the mayor's office on the other corner. And so how the Methodists got right there on the town square, I'm not sure, but it's kind of a coup, I think, for the Methodists. But just, yeah, great location.
It was a very beautiful spot on Vieques. If we do some mission work, the facility, this is their storage room for supplies to distribute to the community. You'll see all kind of things there, diapers and water. You know, their outreach in the communities is tremendous. The minister was also Carmen, as I recall. You know, they're very active. So this seemed like the right mission opportunity for us to be working with if we work on Vieques.
Let's go, the next place we went is a community called Playita Cortada. And we met a gentleman named Wilfredo. And Wilfredo's story kind of, I think, tells the story of a lot of people who have been recovering from the hurricane there. Wilfredo was just as generous and warm as he could be. We're just a couple of gringos walking down the street, and he says, hey, come see my house. Come on in. So he brings us in, and he showed us his home. This is Wilfredo. And that is his home there to the right. And that's the bishop you can see in the yellow shirt. One thing I loved was the bishop would go with us house to house and pray with people and bless people. And you know, the ministering people, clergy and lay in the country, are just doing awesome job of ministering to the people there. And the pastors especially know the people, and the people know their pastors. And that gives me a lot of encouragement that you know, we have some really capable partners there on the island. So Wilfredo said, you know, he said, when the storm came, my wife left, and she would not come back until we got electricity. And he talked about the devastation to his home and the 3 or 4 feet of water in there. He showed us all of his ruined furnishings and furniture. He said, I love motorcycles, and he showed us he's got a motorcycle that he's working on. That's his hobby. But with tears running down his face, he talked about how his wife just refused to come home until they got electricity. And then just a few days before we were there, he got their electricity restored, and his wife came home. And he was so overjoyed at that. And he kept saying, little by little, we are rebuilding our lives, little by little. The next community we visited that evening was called Peña de Oreb. I don't even know what that means. Does anybody here who can help with that? Peña de Oreb? It's a biblical, Mount Oreb is a biblical name, so I don't know if it's related to that. But anyhow, we happened on there having a prayer meeting. This is pretty common, I think, weeknight prayer meetings where folks gather at the churches. And that was a good sign of life, that good things are happening. It's not just a Sunday morning crowd. So this church was alive and active, and they were meeting for prayer. We just kind of came right in on the end of that. We've got some video, I think, of their prayer gathering. So they were meeting in a kind of a fellowship hall space, and then right as we came in and they were finishing, this little boy came up to me and gave me a United Methodist hymnal, which was so sweet. Now there he is. I got a picture of it, and he's teaching me about how to sing out of the hymnal. So you can see the people were like in this space. They had moved the pews. This is not the sanctuary. They moved the pews into the space, and that's where they were meeting typically, because the sanctuary had so much damage. But then at the end of their prayer meeting, they all went to the sanctuary, and they stood in a big circle, and they sang the praises of God, as if to say, look, we don't care that the storm ripped the roof off. We're going to keep doing what God's called us to do. And they did it in that same space. And we've got some video of that we can show you. Did you hear the enthusiasm that they were singing with? All right, we could learn something from that. They were incredible. You can see the roof; it's just gone in some parts. They told us a story about when the winds came and the rain came down on them. Everything in the sanctuary got wet or ruined, except it had a little wooden pedestal, and on top of the pedestal was a Bible. And everything was wet except the Bible. And they said it was open to Psalm 84. Okay, listen, this is Psalm 84. How lovely is your dwelling place, Lord Almighty. My soul yearns, even faints, for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh cry out for the living God. Even the sparrow has found a home, and the swallow a nest for herself, where she may have her young, a place near your altar. And it goes on and on. Better is one day in your course than 1,000 elsewhere. I mean, that's incredible. I don't know how you orchestrate a story like that, friends, except to say, God is showing up in a million small and big ways in this place. And that was a story that stuck with me. What else from Tuesday? Anything else from Tuesday?
What about the signs at that church?
Yeah, do you have pictures? This church was on fire. They had this like determination. They were like, we don't care about the storm. we're going to keep doing ministry. And they had these amazing signs. Someone who speaks Spanish, help us out, please. Yes, the concrete wall has been lost. So they had multiple indications. They were saying, look, the storm hit us hard, but we're going to keep doing what God has called us to do. They had a sign out that, oh, here we go. Tenemos ropa. We have clothes. Niños for the children. Caballeros, which is the men, and mujer, the women. And hours are 8 to 12. So if you need clothes, we got clothes for children, men and women. Come from 8 to 12. Right? So again, this same church, no roof, and here they are. They're distributing clothes to people in their neighborhood who are in need.
So this community had no electricity.
Estamos en pie, so that means we're standing up, and together we will again levantaremos. We will build again our new sanctuary. So they are definitely very resilient, and they have had that since day one. Yeah. You know, everybody else will be crying, and they are just kind of. Yeah. This is a sign that says estamos en pie, so that means we're.
I was saying some of the shots out in the street, I mean, the electric lines all laying in the gutter. There was no electricity in this whole community. This side of the island pretty well still at that point, 4 months, almost 4 months after the hurricane, had no electricity. So you can imagine now some of the houses around had generators, so they could generate a little electricity, and the people that were making do were using generators to keep things safe.
Let's talk about Wednesday. Wednesday morning we had Puerto Rican coffee at the Methodist Conference Center. It was really good and really strong, and they put a lot of milk in it for the gringos. So we could tolerate it. But it was good, and we got to meet with the bishop there and with Carmen, and we had a conversation with a contractor by the name of Naisa, who they're partnering with to do some of this work of rebuilding. So we looked even like at price lists of materials for the church in Levittown, and we'll talk a little bit more about Levittown Church in a few minutes. But basically had a conversation about what this would look like and what our process would look like for our partnership there to help them with building repairs at the church in Levittown. That's primarily what that conversation was.
So just a little bit on that. We did talk about a 3-phase project. It would probably take over approximately a year, we hope. Stabilizing the roof, and $10,000 donation from our church went to that effort. Phase 1, to stabilize the roof, basically putting new layers, laminate layers on the top of the roof. You'll see it in a moment. Levittown Church has a concrete roof, solid roof, so it wasn't metal, but it's still, even concrete roofs in that area sustained significant hurricane damage and leaked significantly.
From there, we went to the Levittown community in Toa Baja, and we visited a clinic called Clínica Bantios, and this was an incredible experience. So Gary and I both had the sense, we didn't say it out loud, but we were saying, why are they taking us here? We didn't really get it until we got in there and heard the story, and it became apparent. Clínica Bantios means Clinic of Thanksgiving. This is a group of medical personnel, but mostly non-medical volunteers who do medical missions, and they do it right there in their neighborhood, but they've also been to other islands in the Caribbean. So here's a group of like foreign missionaries, right? But they happen to be kind of headquartered there on Puerto Rico. And we walked in, and the very first thing they said was, let us tell you the story of how God did this. They said, we started with a box of latex gloves and this building that was mostly empty, and then they took us into this room with this shelf after shelf full of medical supplies. And so now they are giving medical care in this community where there's virtually none besides what they are doing. But they don't just expect people to come to them. They go out into the neighborhoods, and their leader calls it street medicine. And he showed me the maps. He had maps on the wall, and he said, okay, see these red lines? That's where we've been. See the green ones? That's where we have yet to go. So we need to be out on the street engaging with the people. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's what the church needs to be doing. This guy has got it figured out. So this guy who we met is amazing, one of the most amazing people I've ever met in my whole life. His name is Dr. Jose Vargas Vidot. He is a physician. He used to be a pastor, and now he is the first elected independent state senator from Puerto Rico. I don't know if you can tell by looking at him. He doesn't look like a state senator necessarily. He's got the hat, he's got the ponytail, and some facial hair. But this guy was elected by the people. He says, my party is the people. And you ever met someone who's like so full of the Holy Spirit, it just like comes out of their pores, and they have a vision for ministry to touch people? That's Dr. Vidot. I can't even possibly describe for you just what he was like, but I was moved by his presence. And he wasn't supposed to be there. He was on vacation, apparently. So we're talking in the clinic, and he just sort of slips in quietly. And then all of a sudden I realized, oh, that's the guy. That's the guy they were talking about.
So this area is called Tahoe Baja. Maybe you remember this area. It's west of San Juan, and Hurricane Irma had come across the island 10 days earlier. It was also Category 4, by the way. So Irma was bad enough. It filled all the reservoirs with water. And so when Maria came across, they had to release water out of the reservoirs. And you'll see some damage in a moment. This is the area that they were in. It was flooded, some areas 10 feet up to the second story in some of the buildings. Within 10 days of Maria being departed the island, the senator said, we've got to go in and help this community. This particular facility was in high enough ground that it was not flooded, but it was in the area of the flooding, significant flooding. It was an old Head Start facility that had been, Head Start programs have been on decline, so it was empty. He asked the government, can I use this facility? And they said yes. So within 10 days of the hurricane, they had this operating facility to minister and help treat medically the people in the community that had need for medications, to get their medications. So they had free medications and free services for all those residents in that community.
98% of the people who work in the clinic are volunteers, so only a couple staff. One of the volunteers we heard from, we got a quick video to show you of what he had to say to us.
It's been our experience, and we thought you were going to bring blessing, but we're blessed already to have you here. So
the Holy Spirit is working everywhere. Inside you and with us. And we are, at the same time, we're blessed by your presence and seeing, what you're doing in the community.
That's why we praise God.
Well, we're blessed to hear your story. The Spirit is moving. The Spirit is moving here. It's obvious.
And sometimes we have 5 patients at the same time with different doctors. And just the Holy Spirit reveals that we have to just praise God, and we just stop the whole clinic. And I'm telling you this, and I'm feeling the presence of God. And we got to just praise God. There's no other thing. That's why I think we're making the difference. That's what we're here for.
So we had kind of some spontaneous worship at that point with music and the scriptures, and the guy playing the guitar would go around to the patients and sing to them while they were there in the clinic. Just really incredible kind of comprehensive care for the people of that community.
Let me, I think at that point they had served over 3,000, I think that was the number they gave us, but I told Pastor, having done these kind of missions in places like Jamaica, in the community that we saw, the indication of how successful they were is there were no waiting lines. There was no one waiting to be served. They were coming in and being treated as they came in the door. That's amazing.
When we told them we want to come back and bring some medical care, they said, we'd love to help you. And the cool thing is they know the people, they know the communities, they know how to access these things and mobilize people. So that's an incredible resource that we have there. We drove through some of the worst poverty that we saw that afternoon, called a community called Villas del Sol, so like Villas of the Sun. And it was just house after house after house of really, really awful poverty. And it was pretty clear that these folks were in a difficult place even before the hurricane hit, and then of course the hurricane just made it worse. We didn't know what to expect next, but I think part of what was happening while we were driving around is the church at Levittown was getting ready for us to come. And the pastor was on the cell phone saying, we're driving around and we'll be over there in a few minutes. And the people were preparing a service for us to participate in. And I wasn't expecting that at all. I was kind of blown away, actually. We were expecting to have a tour and have an interview with the pastor. But they brought us to the church at Levittown. And this is the church that we had originally agreed to partner with and whose roof has damage, and to whom we gave the first $10,000 of the gift to repair the roof, which is really a matter of resealing and waterproofing the concrete roof. The roof is there, but it's leaking. And so the idea is to help them waterproof the roof. So we get there, and I said, okay, can we get a tour? They said, yeah, you just come in, just come in. And we walked in the door, and there was music and there was singing, and they handed us bottles of cold water, and many of the women were dressed in traditional garb, and I felt like an honored guest at their church.
I want you to take note of something. This was the week of the Three Kings, and these are the Three Kings, which is Epiphany, and they celebrate Christmas, an extended Christmas. So they were still in the middle of the Christmas celebration, still on holiday, and things are curious, aren't they? The three of us went down there. They had a Three Kings service, and they gave us 3 gifts to bring back, and it just seemed prophetic to me.
One is a statue of the Three Kings, and we're going to pass that around so you can see it, and that'll be in my office. You can come visit anytime. They also gave us candy, and I brought it tonight, and I thought the children who are here might like to have some candy. If you have permission from your parents, come up here and get a piece. Some of it does seem to have like sesame seeds in it, so if anybody's allergic to sesame seeds, don't get this kind, but there's like some gummies and lollipops and stuff, so I'm going to put it right here. Kids, welcome right now. Come up. Yeah. That is your reward for sitting through Pastor Brad's talk.
And this sesame candy is one of my favorite candies. I'll eat this, so leave a few of them.
We have some video from the worship service that we were a part of, this Three Kings service, and so let's show you some of that now. Austin, you ready for that? Do you recognize that song? while the song's going on, Carmen, who's our guide, is leaning over to me and interpreting it. She's saying that they're saying the song is sung from God's perspective to the people of Puerto Rico, saying, Puerto Rico, you are my island. You are my island. You are my people. Look to the sky. I am with you. Puerto Rico, you are my island.
I hope you realize that what you've just seen was their expression of gratitude to this church for the fundraising efforts. They were well aware of our Christmas Eve offering and that we were going to help them rebuild. So we were just so touched by that message to us and to you.
At the end of that dance performance, they gave me the flag, the Puerto Rican flag. It was really incredible.
It's in your office, right?
Yeah. You can come visit that too. And they invited me to come up and say a few words. I think we have that. I said some words of blessing and gratitude about what you all have done, what God's doing.
So they gave us...
When Hurricane Maria came to Puerto Rico, our hearts broke for you. And
cuando el huracán azotó a Puerto Rico, él dice que su corazón se quebró.
And some of our leaders heard God say that we need to come and help.
Y algunos líderes entendieron que Dios les había dicho que tenían que venir a cooperar.
And so we called your Bishop Ortiz, and we said that we want to help, but we had some stipulations.
Llamaron al obispo, a nuestro obispo, el reverendo Ortiz, y les dijeron que querían venir a ayudar, pero ellos tenían ciertas estipulaciones, ciertas reglas.
We want to help the church, but not just any church. We asked him, could he help us find a church who is alive with the Spirit of Christ?
Querían ayudar a una iglesia, pero no a cualquier iglesia, sino a una iglesia que estuviese viva y que estuviese con el Espíritu de Dios encendido.
And he said Levittown. He said Levittown Church. Amen. So it's clear to me that the Spirit of God is alive in this community, and that you are sharing the love of Christ with each other and with your neighbors. We saw pictures of the damage to your church building, but we also saw pictures of you gathering food and supplies to give to your neighbors. And we love that. We are so warm. So we want to encourage you that not only does the bishop think very high of you, but you are loved by God, and we love you. And so we want to come and help you in your rebuilding and help you in your ministry. So we want to give you a gift today. This is Gary Sullivan. He's the chairperson, el presidente of our church council.
El presidente.
The pastor Regino.
Sí. Él dice, para aquellos que a lo mejor no entendieron, que el obispo le mencionó que Levittown era una iglesia que necesitaba ayuda y que tenía el Espíritu de Dios sobre ella. Así que él quiere que sepan que no solo el obispo tiene una alta estima de esta congregación, sino que también ellos, a través de las fotos y los videos que vieron, que mientras a nosotros se nos destruyó el templo, nosotros, a pesar de eso, estábamos buscando ayuda para ayudar a otros.
So we want to help you repair your roof.
Quieren ayudarnos a reparar el...
We have a check. This is the beginning of a relationship, we hope, and we have a check for you for $10,000. We give glory to God, and we want to help you to begin to fix your roof so that you can have a dry sanctuary, and so you can meet to worship God, and you can gather to serve your community.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for the blessing you've been to us. Like the three kings, we have come to offer a gift, but we find that we ourselves have been blessed. That's probably enough for me talking. I think we have one of the bishop expressing his gratitude to you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Hector Ortiz. I am the bishop of the Methodist Church of Puerto Rico. And we are very grateful for the visit of your pastor, Brad, Gary, and Austin to our island. It's a privilege, the support, the prayer that we receive of your church. You have another family here in Puerto Rico, the family of the Methodist Church of Puerto Rico.
We're so grateful for your hospitality and the warm way you have received us and loved us and made us part of your community already. I see beauty in the people and in the island, but also pain at the grief about the losses that people have had. Tell me about what is the greatest needs that you have, that your people have.
Well, we have different needs in Puerto Rico. In this moment, we need the prayers. People like you, your presence here is very important to us. We are not alone dealing with this crisis. We have problem with the medical condition of the people. As you see yesterday in Vieques and today here in Tuabaja, we have a lot of needs in the health area. We have needs in the rehabilitation of sanctuary, of churches and housing. In Hurricane Maria damaged about 250,000 houses in Puerto Rico and destroyed 100,000. We have a lot of needs here in Puerto Rico.
Yeah. It's amazing to see the kind of destruction that the hurricane did, and with 175 mile an hour sustained winds, it was nothing then to take roofs off of houses.
Category 5, according to Sampson-Simpson scale.
And so the first category 5 since 1920s or something like that?
Yes, 100 years ago.
100 years storm, yeah. Wow. Tell us about where you see hope in the people and the resiliency of Puerto Ricans.
Well, I think that our people have a strong basis, spiritual basis, and we see in the faces of the people, the faces of the people that receive a hit of this hurricane, but have the strength to rising up.
Yeah, that is awesome. And what do you see God doing? What is God doing in Puerto Rico?
He's doing a lot of things in the church and outside of the church. And here in Puerto Rico and outside of Puerto Rico. For example, you visit, your presence here is a manifestation of God. And we see God in different manner acting on behalf of our people.
That is awesome. God is good, and I'm grateful to you.
I mean,
we're about an hour in, friends. So I want us to wrap up, and I want to answer your questions that you might have, and I want to give you an idea about what we imagine is our next step. So we're really thinking there's three ways that we can make a difference on the island, and one is in partnership with the Levittown Church. To help them with their physical plant, to get it back up to speed so that they can be in ministry to their neighbors, right? So the point is not the building, the point is they have a mission base so that they can be in mission to their neighbors, just like we're in mission to our neighbors here. So that's one piece. Another option is a medical mission experience, and Gary had a interest meeting the other week. Our goal is to take a medical team. We had originally said March, we'll still try for that. If not, we'll go eventually, but to take medical care, especially to that teeny island of Vieques, where the hospital is closed and where they have very little medical care available. So that is another piece. And a third potential is to do some home repair. Pastor Matt has got an idea about taking some young people and maybe some older people too to go and do some repairs of people's homes. You heard the bishop say 100,000 houses destroyed and another 250,000 houses damaged. And so lots of opportunity for us to go and minister to the people there. That's all I want to say to you tonight. What questions do you have? Comments, ideas, thoughts? Austin, come here, buddy. Austin, yes, Austin is the man behind the curtain on every Sunday morning. So yeah, thank you so much for that. Austin was an incredible asset to this team. All of these photos and video were taken by Austin.
This was Austin's first time flying.
Yes. It was awesome. I loved it.
Right. Say, what do you want to tell us about your experience?
Oh my gosh, it was, I really don't know what to say. It was so cool. I was just amazed at the hope in everyone and just how like grateful and hopeful and excited people are to help bring Puerto Rico back and to rise up. They had a saying, Puerto Rico se levante, and they were saying like Puerto Rico will rise again, Puerto Rico will rise again, and that's all they ever will talk about is just rising up and partnering with everyone and getting better. So it was really awesome to see their like passion and want to get better and rise up and recover from this horrible storm that hit them. And it was just amazing to see that in them.
Resurrection's real.
That's right.
Resurrection's real in Puerto Rico, friends. Yeah. Also, I'm grateful that you went with us and took time out of your schedule over the holiday to come be a part of that. Thank you so much.
Yes, Estelle. There was a video we saw when we were down there, or maybe when we got back. One of the big schools in San Juan, when they got electricity, I think I posted on Facebook. Maybe you saw that. They were just ecstatic. One of the things we looked at before we went is the condition of the schools for safe drinking water, and they apparently had done a pretty good job of getting the schools in a condition where they could meet, but they were just really starting back schools. And I met a young student at the church. Came up to me. She's about 13, and speaking fluent English to me. Of course, in their schools, they take both languages, English and Spanish. And I realized later that she was practicing her English on me. I wasn't that cute. So anyway. So it was fun.
Other questions, comments? Earl. Every day they offload lots of containers. The way that our people told it there, they said some days you go to Home Depot and then you find what you need. Other days you go and the store's wiped out because FEMA already got there. And they tend to shut down the store, let FEMA do their shopping, and then open it back up, and that's not. But our sense from our conversation is the materials that we would need, we would be able to get on the island, and that's part of our conversation with the contractor there, that she can help us do that.
They didn't ask for building materials. Carmen said that they had to do some orders of building materials in Florida, at Home Depot in Florida, have them shipped in. But the building materials, 30% higher in Puerto Rico Island just because of the demand. So they were going to do whatever is prudent to get materials.
Yes. Yeah, great question. Did you hear that? What do people do when their house is destroyed? I didn't really see the shelters per se. A lot of people came to the United States, the mainland. A lot of people stayed with family, and a lot of people stayed with their neighbors. So one community we visited, Playita Cortada, I think it was. You saw 2 or 3 houses destroyed all in a row. All the families from those 3 houses were living with their neighbor whose house was not destroyed. And it was not a big house, right? It was tiny, 4 families living there. And then we saw a man back at the concrete slab where his house had been, sitting under a tarp. And we said, what are you doing? He said, well, during the day I try to come back down to my space, so give a little space to my neighbor so that I don't annoy him, staying in his home all the time. But people they just care for their neighbors. They just look out for each other, and that's a lot of it, is neighbors helping neighbors. Write your congressman, write our senators. Tell them, we have concern about people in Puerto Rico, and to remind them that they are Americans and that we can, they made us aware of their difficult political situation because, they're neither a state nor independent. They're kind of in between. Makes it a little messy and difficult, but some things I wasn't aware of. They pay full into Social Security and federal benefits, but they only take out like 60% of what we get. Right? And so they use the phrase taxation without representation a lot. And they said, look, Pastor, we don't have anyone in Congress representing us, and yet here we are. So, yeah, please write your congressman, write to the senators and say, hey, we can do better. We can do better for them.
Another thing with the government is the U.S. Congress has a lot of ruling over what Puerto Rico can and can't do. And the only thing they get in Congress is somebody to say whether they're for or against it, but that person from Puerto Rico has no vote. So only the states vote on Puerto Rico's decisions in Congress. So they have no vote in Congress either.
Yes, ma'am. I think they do. But again, I think it's at a reduced rate in terms of the benefit that we get. Any other questions? Friends, I'm so grateful for your support. I'm going to be around tonight. Gary will hang out. And I believe there's dessert for us. Estelle, tell us about dessert. Okay, did you hear that? This is the most important part of the night. Dessert in the Family Life Center down the hall. If you're not sure where that is, just follow the crowd. Ice cream, cookies, and homemade things. There's still some more Puerto Rican candy right here. So feel free to come and get some. I took one of the sesame seed things for Gary because he would chop your arm off trying to take it. Just kidding. Thank you all so much. I'm so grateful you're here tonight and we can continue a conversation about what God's call on this church is. And we'll continue to be open to see what we can do next. Go in peace, friends. God bless you. Let's have some dessert.
Thank you.